a highly entertaining NFL football game. I mean, haymaker after haymaker with both teams barely standing at the end, and yet they were still throwing punches and landing over and over again. It's a shame that it didn't end differently. I wanted it to end differently. I know some of you, and I've read a little bit of the social media from late last night, were like, perfect scenario. They played great, but they didn't win. Better draft position. No, I wanted them to win that game. It was a game played by two teams who made a lot of really good plays in the game. Unfortunately, Denver made the last good play, and it was very decisive. Nick Bonito smacking down the Marcus Mariota 2-point conversion throw, which was wide open for what would have been a walk-off win. Denver in overtime, 27-26. Good morning, everybody. This from JC. I just read this beauty. 7 straight losses. I'm done. You have to win that game. Mariota just has to put some air under it. If they had a better backup quarterback, they would have won the game last night. This from my guy Kevin. I'm not. It's a different Kevin, not the normal Kevin. Kevin said that Doc was killing Kingsbury last night after the game. I'm like, no. You must have had that wrong. He had to be praising Kingsbury. They shredded the number 1 defense in the league all night long. I don't get it. I don't understand it. But look, it's always tough at 3-9. It is. It's hard to shake also the post-traumatic Snyder syndrome that everybody has. This a second straight overtime loss. This one, unlike the Miami loss in Madrid, though, because this was truly against not only one of the league's best teams, but the league, has 2 teams that are on this massive win streak, New England and Denver. And in Denver's case, they're just flat out either the best defense or one of the top 2. I think Houston's really close right now defensively. Those 2 teams are just dominant defensive football teams. Denver was anyway coming into this game. I'll have my game take. It's going to be a long list. Sorry for those that feel like last night was a lost cause. It's going to be a long list of things that I really liked from the game, and I'm very aware that they lost the game 27-26. And look, some of the things on the game take list that are good and positive and encouraging and promising in terms of the way I feel personally about them, I understand, and I'll concede this point going in. It's in some cases like with the defense in comparison to what it's been. Like the defense overall wasn't great, but compared to what it's been, it was really improved, much improved. I mean, they let Denver, they were a sieve in overtime, letting Denver go down and score a touchdown in 5 plays. But still, it was much better than it's been. So when I get to that, understand that especially as it relates to the defense, I'm conceding that some of this is in comparison to what it's been in recent weeks. The defense has improved since Dan Quinn took it over. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Now, he hasn't had to call a defense against Detroit or Seattle or Kansas City. All right, Miami and Denver aren't quite those teams offensively, but still, it looks different. It feels different. There are plays being made, and it's been impactful. Cliff Kingsbury, I mean, I love a lot of the people that weigh in on this stuff. But if you don't think Cliff Kingsbury had a good night last night, I'm not sure what you were watching. He literally had the league's number 1 defense and Vance Joseph, a really good defensive coordinator, reeling the entire night. They ran the ball well. That was huge in the game. Terry McLaurin's return was so impactful. They missed having a true number 1 wide receiver, starting wide receiver on the field. Not just because of the plays he can make, but because of the way a defense has to defend you. When you don't have real NFL wide receivers on the field, which has been the case in some of these games, you don't have to worry about getting beat in man coverage. You don't have to worry about, you can focus on the line of scrimmage and dominating that. Marcus Mariota, my God, what a blanking night he had after a brutal interception early in the game. And there were a couple of other plays that were head scratchers, no doubt, but he turned into a flat out gunslinger in the fourth quarter and in overtime. I thought for the most part, the good so far outweighed the bad. The O-line last night against that defense to give up 2 sacks and a lot of it is on Cliff. Cliff gets a lot of the credit because he had a game plan that understood what they were facing. Like, drop back wasn't going to be the way to do it. You had to run the ball. You had to go quick game. It was constant early on. Really up until the latter stages of the second half when they had to drop back. But at that point, they had Denver's defense in complete. They were flummoxed. They didn't know what was going on. But the quick game, the run game, the O-line, Traylon Burks, the catch he made, his return to the lineup, who knew? Wagner had a pick. How about the Wagner play on the 3rd and 4 on Denver's last drive in regulation? You had to get a stop, or maybe the game ends there with a first down. And Wagner appears to check to a play that pulls Jacob Martin back into coverage right to where Bo Nix was throwing it. And he gets the pass breakup. Just a lot of good things from the game last night. And I'll get to all of them in the game take. And yes, I realize they didn't win the game. Denver had 27 points. Our team had 26 at the end. It's a 7th straight loss. They are 3-9. I'm fully aware of that. But I'm going to focus here before I get to my game take on a team that has had nothing go right for it all year long. By the way, add last night's finish to the list of gut punches. But I'm going to focus on what I think I've watched here in the last 2 weeks. And not just the last 2 weeks. I mean, there was the Detroit game and the Seattle games were really, really disturbing. There's no doubt about it. But we also, at least those that are willing to entertain the idea that actually injuries aren't an excuse. They're actually really impactful to a season. They just didn't have players on the field, and their defense was a complete and utter train wreck. But I think what we saw last night is we're seeing a culture that is healthy. I talked to somebody this morning who was in the locker room after the game, and he said, this is just so much different, and it's been different. Even during this losing stretch, they don't have losers. They don't have guys looking to get out quickly. They don't have guys throwing guys under the bus. This isn't the Snyder era. It's a culture that's healthy despite 9 losses in a row, despite a season that has gone sideways at every turn, despite taking just one body blow week in and week out. In Madrid against the Dolphins and last night, you saw a team that is nowhere near ready to bail. Not yet anyway, and I don't think it will. I think the players that they focused on bringing in, going back to last year, have a certain team-first profile, competitive level that leads to having the ability to survive stretches like the one they've gone through this year. Now, surviving, it's not going to lead to a winning record this year. It's not going to lead to playoff games this year. But continuing to prepare to win games and play to win has legs, in my opinion. If you don't agree, that's fair. I'm not going to try to talk you out of it. I think it has legs. This is a head coach, and I've pointed this out since the day he was hired. And now, after one full season here, in the last 4 regular season games of his head coaching career, he's 20-4. And in many of those seasons, their playoff hopes were extinguished. They weren't really legitimately there. This is a guy that doesn't lose teams. They don't go and start chucking people, including him and his staff, under the bus. For whatever reason, Dan Quinn is well-liked, well-respected, and very much believed in. His message over the years as a head coach has not failed him in seasons like this. It's assisted him So I've said this a bunch over the last year and a half. I like Dan Quinn, and it is in comparison to what we had. I like this group in the front office. I like Adam Peters. I like our football organization right now. I do. Again, I get it. It's like, yeah, Sheehan, like after what we went through for 25 years, we'd take anybody. It's true that almost anybody was going to look good in comparison. But if I were being objective and didn't have the 25 years of Snyder saddled to my brain and my heart, I still think I would be like, nah, this dude, there's something to him. There's something to the organization right now that is a good culture. Treylon Burks on the post-game show apparently told London Fletcher and Bram, I think they do the interview, that it's just, it's the culture that he's absolutely enjoyed, that this place is a place that players really like. We saw that before the season began with Ben's agent survey that said Washington now is among the places that people feel like good people, good coaches, good setting, good culture. I don't, we've talked a lot about this over the last, month or so. I just can't relate to the vitriol. I can't relate right now. I'm not knocking you for it. I'm knocking you for the wanting to fire everybody. I'm not knocking you for being passionate and being angry and being upset. That's better than being apathetic. But I think, those of you who have wanted everybody to be fired, you saw last night with just some of their key contributors back on the field, how much different it looks versus practice squad and off the street guys. Imagine when the starting quarterback gets back. Look, Mariota last night. I mean, the dude was he was awesome in so many ways. I said, this was a game between two teams throwing one haymaker after another. Mariota was throwing a lot of the haymakers for our team. And I loved the performance. It was resilient. It was tough. It was fearless. It was different for him than some of his other stops. But there's no doubt in my mind, and I don't think there should be a doubt in most of your minds, that with Jaden Daniels, they win that game last night. They beat Miami and Madrid too, and they're 5-7, and the season's on. But he's been hurt, hasn't been available. Terry got back last night, but he's been hurt. He's missed a bunch of games. Will Harris back last night. Payne back last night. And they'll hopefully continue to get more. And by the way, let me be clear. That's no knock on Mariota because he might be the best backup quarterback in the league. And as we've talked about, this particular system and situation is the best of his career. But you see the difference with some of the key players coming back. Having Terry is, of course, a game changer. Having him out there with a healthy Debo and even Burks is completely different than Tay Martin and Robbie Chosen and Jacoby Jones and Chris Moore. By the way, did you hear Chris Collinsworth last night mention what I told you guys a few weeks back about the Seattle game? I told you that kind of in the response to the Kurt Warner critique video on Jaden, but Chris Collinsworth mentioned it last night as well, that in that Seattle game, the receivers they had in that game, it was an absolute S show. They were running the wrong routes in the game. Remember how Jaden immediately would tuck it and start to scramble? It's because where he was looking, the receiver wasn't running to based on the play. And Collinsworth said it last night so matter-of-factly. It was interesting. Clearly, they told, Tirico and Collinsworth in the lead-up about what had happened in the Seattle game. But I mentioned that to you guys a couple of weeks ago, and you guys were like, oh, you're going to kill. I didn't kill Kurt Warner. There were some plays that he pointed out that were legitimate. Steve Suter said the same thing in the film breakdown. But a bigger issue for that game that night was they just didn't have guys in the game that should be in the game, which has been the case all year long. But look, last night, Will Harris back, Payne back, Terry back. I thought Payne, by the way, played great. I think he did. He made a lot of plays in the run game, that's for sure. I felt good about the game and what I was watching. Not the loss, no moral victories, but given what this team looked like against Seattle and Detroit, 3-4 weeks ago, where they had no chance at all. Both of those games over by halftime. They had guys out there that just weren't anywhere near good enough to compete with teams like those. Madrid against Miami and this one against a Denver team that has now won 9 games in a row and has just a legitimate shutdown defense and has all year long. Not last night. Again, I think Houston's right now is number 1. I think Denver's number 2, but whatever. That's quibbling. But Kingsbury, Mariota, Ertz, Terry, the O-line, the running game. I mean, Washington's offense rolled up 419 yards, the second most of the season against Denver's defense. They were 8 for 17 on third down, the best third down performance against Denver's number 1 third down defense this season. They were 3 for 3 on fourth down in the game. They lost. They lost the game. But they're going to be a live team here in the next few weeks. The caveat to that would be, of course, if they get Jaden back, they continue to get healthier. And then, by the way, the players that come back stay healthy. That's a big thing, right? I liked last night. Denver may not win the Super Bowl. They're obviously a playoff team. They may be the number 1 seed in the AFC when all is said and done. I'm not sold on Knicks quite yet. It's early. I think he's got a great coordinator. He's got some good pieces. And obviously, the biggest supporting piece for Bo Nix as a young quarterback is playing on a team with an absolute dominant defense. I think they're really missing J.K. Dobbins the last few games in the backfield. He was having a phenomenal season. But the Skins were right there, man. 1 play away. But damn, that Nick Bonito, what a star player he has turned into. One of the best edge defensive players in the league. We talked about it on Friday. They had to keep him from wrecking the football game. He's done it multiple times this year. He made a great play. He made a great play. If he didn't, it was a walk-off win because McNichols was wide open on a perfectly designed 2-point play that, obviously accounted for greatness on the other side. Nick Bonito is great. And Marcus Mariota, yeah, he had to get it up in the air and put more air under it for sure. Tough loss. Really, really tough loss. I wanted it so badly watching it last night for selfish reasons, because it's just better when the team comes off a win. It's just better overall for people like me than losing is. It just is. I know some of you over the years have debated that. And look, some of the controversy, some of the craziness was not terrible for us, but winning's always much better. And I just thought, if they had pulled this off last night, no playoff scenario talk, but at 4-8, then they had a chance to get to 6-8 against Minnesota and the Giants. Minnesota, Brian Flores and that defense, they're no joke. Okay. Now their offense is a mess. Their offense is a mess. I have no idea if it's going to be J.J. McCarthy or Max Brosmer, who threw 4 picks and scored no points against Seattle. Wouldn't it be nice to get 4 picks in a game? Got 1 last night. Got a takeaway last night. That was huge. But just would have been, the idea of the possibility of getting to 6-8 before that Philadelphia game on December 20th, where you're not mathematically eliminated yet. For all practical purposes, you would still be, eliminated, but it just would have maybe given us something legitimate to cheer for this year. But they didn't win. They lost. Another loss. 7 straight losses. That's a fact. And what's also a fact is why they've lost 7 in a row. And last night was a reminder that they are a much better football team with, even just some of their best players back on the field.